Born in 1883, it is said that Krishna Menon prayed incessantly throughout his life to meet a true satguru, an authentic teacher or enlightened rishi saint. Eventually, this led to his first encounter in Calcutta with Swami Yogananda, not to be confused with Paramahansa Yogananda, the Indian realized saint who introduced many Westerners to Kriya Yoga and meditation. His meeting lasted only one night, but altered the course of his life. Practicing bhakti and Raja Yoga as well as Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, Krishna Menon realized the self in 1923, becoming known as Shri Atmananda, which means the blissful self. Later, after he began to teach, he used only Jnana Yoga. He credited his professional career with helping him uncover truth, in that the high level of activity offered the maximum temptations and obstacles. This is particularly significant to Western students who live in a modern culture of distraction and temptation that is unequaled. Shri Atmananda Krishna Menon deeply influenced many Westerners, including John Levy, who wrote The Nature of Man According to Vedanta. It was about Atmananda's approach. And Walter Kiers, the Dutch student of Sri Atmananda and also Ramana Maharshi, as well as Ananda Wood, who wrote extensively on him. In his early 30s, spiritual questions began to engage Krishna Menon's serious attention. Once again, he sought answers through books. This was the only avenue open to him, but nothing satisfied him. As a result of his efforts, however, he was deeply convinced that a true guru, a sage who is prepared to lead an aspirant to the goal, could alone take him to the truth. He also knew that he was incompetent to choose the right guru. Therefore, he took the safe course of praying to the personal God to bless him with the right guru. This prayer went deeper and deeper day by day, and he spent several sleepless nights drenched in tears. His mental agony was intolerable. His official duties, however, were carried on as before. In that state, one day at Padmanapuram, he met a naked Avatu sannyasin by the roadside. The sannyasin was bruised all over from stones pelted by mischievous urchins on the street. Yet he only smiled. Immediately, Sri Krishna Menon recognized in the Avaduta, that is, the old sannyasin, whom he had met at the age of 10. The Swami embraced him and consoled him and told him that a great and real Mahatma would shortly meet him, to guide him to his spiritual goal. This consoled him, but only for a little while. The old mental agony reappeared after some days, and he began to pray again with redoubled earnestness for a real guru. Attainment of Satguru. Sri Krishna Menon had developed a natural aversion towards many so-called sannyasins, as he had found from his frequent discussions with them that their grasp of the truth was feeble. At last, one evening in the year 1919, at the age of 35, he happened to meet by the roadside, not far from the police station at Takale, a true sannyasin, visibly great, wearing flowing ochre robes and a big Bengali turban. The sannyasin looked at him with an enchanting smile. The Swamiji, seated on a culvert, beckoned him to his side and spoke to him in clear and exquisite English, as though he had long known him. Indeed he had, and the sannyasin alone knew it. He was attracted by the sannyasin from the first sight of him, and was fascinated by his charming manners, gait, and talk. Being invited by him for a short walk, Sri Krishna Menon could no longer resist the temptation to accompany him. So they walked together silently for about a mile, till they reached an old unoccupied house at the western gate of the Padma Bapuram fort. Vehement opposition and ultimate surrender. The sun had set, but darkness did not shroud the earth as usual, since the bright moon had already risen. In that cool and gentle moonlight, they entered the house and sat in the front room. A frank and lively conversation on spiritual topics was started. Shri Krishna Menon, as every sincere aspirant is expected to do, asked many shrewd and taxing questions, which under any other circumstances would have seemed to offend against ordinary politeness. But the Swamiji, overflowing with love and inwardly enjoying the earnestness, sincerity, and shrewdness of the aspirant, answered the questions most satisfactorily and gently and unostentatiously, covering even those in the mind of the aspirant to which he had not yet given expression. Much more than the unassailable logic and the applicability of the answers, it was the extreme humility of the great Swamiji that captivated the heart of the aspirant and enslaved him at last. The ego being thus paralyzed, Sri Krishna Menon immediately prostrated at the feet of the Swami, literally washing his feet with his tears. After some moments, when he could barely speak, he got up and prayed for instructions to enable him to reach the ultimate, if he was considered worthy enough. The Swamiji, who was only waiting for that moment of genuine surrender, replied with a smile of love and joy, "It is for that alone I have come all the way from Calcutta. I have no other interest in Travancore. I knew of your yearnings even from that distance." Initiation and departure of the Guru. They talked in that room the whole night, and before daybreak, all instruction needed for the whole of the disciple's spiritual career had been imparted by the Swami and imbibed by the disciple. The instructions covered the path of devotion to the personal God, Krishna, as the Atma Murti, and not as the Bhagavata Krishna, and also different paths of yoga like Raja Yoga, etc. They ended with the path of jnana, the direct perception method or strict vichara marga, adopting the separation process, as distinguished from the method of meditation adopting the absorption process. The Swamiji shrewdly discovered a lack of enthusiasm on the part of his disciple to take to the path of devotion or yoga as directed. So the Swamiji said gently, "I appreciate your reluctance to take 2 preliminary courses of devotion and yoga, and I admit you are quite right. For mere realization of the ultimate truth, the last course, namely jnana, is alone necessary. But I want you to be something more, which you will understand only later. Therefore, please undertake them first. It won't take you long to finish them both." Evidently, the Swamiji had already decided to crown him as an acharya, and to be an ideal acharya, one has to be familiar with all the intricate experiences along the different paths. Before sunrise, the Swamiji got up, satisfied with the fulfillment of his mission. It was only then that Sri Krishna Menon thought of the impending departure of his Guru. The day had not dawned, and his home was somewhat far away. It was not possible for him to offer his Guru the hospitality of his household or even a conventional dakshina. The Swamiji at once discerned his thoughts and feelings and said with a smile, "There is no obligation in spirituality, there being no personality involved. Follow my instructions faithfully, and you shall attain perfection soon. That alone and nothing else is the real dakshina to the Guru. Therefore, don't worry." So saying, the Swamiji took his leave and returned straight to Calcutta. This was the first and the last meeting in flesh and blood between the Guru and the disciple. A note about Guru Swami. The Swamiji was no ordinary sannyasin. He was a great yogi and jnani by the name of Yogananda, the like of whom the world has rarely seen. He was a great scholar and had mastery over many languages, including English. He came of a princely family in Rajputan. He became a sannyasin at the age of 12 and a jnani well established in the absolute in his early teens. From Rajasthan, he came to Calcutta, where he lived in a small ashram with 4 sannyasin disciples, all of whom lived with him. It was in the year 1919 that Sri Krishna Menon was pining in Travancore for a real guru. When his agony was deep, it touched a tender chord in the Swami, then resting in Calcutta. The guru-disciple relationship is believed to be predestined and not accidental. No amount of intellectual reasoning can explain it. The guru-disciple relationship is outside the ken of human understanding. Otherwise, how could we explain the experience of Shri Atmananda himself? The spiritual pangs of an earnest aspirant in Travancore were transmitted over 1,000 miles straight to Calcutta. They were received there by that great sannyasin alone, while they missed the notice of all other sages and yogis then living all over India, both far and near. As soon as the Swami heard the call, he said to his chief sannyasin disciple, "My child is crying for help in Travancore. I'm going there to console him." So saying, he started by the next train at his own expense to Trivandrum, and thence to Padmavapuram, where he sat on the culvert. He knew full well that Sri Krishna Menon would come that way, and so he did. Sri Krishna Menon was the last disciple of Swami Yogananda. He was also the only grihastha, the householder disciple of the Swami. Spiritual sadhana and realization. The very day the Swami left him, Sri Krishna Menon started an intense practice of spiritual exercises, beginning with the path of devotion, in strict conformity with the instructions given to him. He rose steadily in the line of devotion till he took up the Radha Hridaya Bhavana, the meditation on the heart of Radha, the highest exercise of personal devotion to the Ishta Diva. Thus he went through all the thrilling and intoxicating experiences of selfless love, culminating in its own samadhi. It did not take him more than 6 months to cover all this, and it was towards the end of this period that he composed his classic work, the Radha Mandavam, of 48 verses in Malayalam. Next he went through the hardest grind of yogic exercises, following the paths of different yogas in order. In the course of his yogic exercises, once his body was paralyzed. This happens to all yogis when they transcend a particular nerve center. It is only a simple yogic reaction on the strained human constitution, and it disappears in due course without leaving any adverse effects. But the family of Sri Krishna Menon was terribly upset, and so they turned to all kinds of medical treatments, which were of no avail. At last the news reached the ears of a great yogi and jnani called Sri Kantapi, Swami Kal, who was then in his old age living in Trivandrum. He said that it was no disease, that it would have no adverse results, and that no doctor's medicine would have any effect on his body, which was then in a hypersensitive state. It was then about a fortnight since the malady had become acute. And anyhow, Sri Swamikal took compassion upon the anxious condition of the family of Sri Krishna Menon, and so prescribed a simple herbal preparation to be applied to the soles of his feet. It was applied at about 5 p.m. that day. In a few minutes he fell into an unusually long and deep sleep till 8 the next morning. When he awoke, he was normal. The herbal application was continued for 2 more days as directed by the Swami. Some months later, Sri Krishna Menon paid Shri Kantampi Swamikal a courtesy visit. It was then that the Swami revealed to him that it was not at his own instance that he had administered the antidote for the yogic ailment, but because it was desired by the great Yogananda himself, who had requested him through the subtle sphere to do so. He declared that otherwise no spiritual man would ever interfere in the sadhana of a true guru's disciple, and nothing untoward would ever happen to the sadhak, the spiritual aspirant. A few more months of intense yogic practices took Sri Krishna Menon to the highest experiences in the line of yoga. Long and deep Nirvikalpa Samadhi he enjoyed often and at will, but it failed to satisfy him because it was time limited and caused as a result of intense effort. According to him, truth is uncaused, permanent, and self-luminous. Therefore, he had to seek for the ultimate truth by other means. He took to regular jnana sadhana with great ease and fortitude, and visualized the ultimate truth in a very short time. This period of his spiritual practices, covering all three paths, did not last for more than 4 years, until about 1923. All necessary instructions were clearly and regularly imparted to him by his guru, appearing before him in lively vision during his sadhana. He was given the spiritual name Atmananda by his own guru, and he has been known by that name ever since. Inclination towards sannyasa and confirmation of grihastha ashrama, the householdership. Towards the end of his spiritual sadhana, he felt a strong urge to take to sannyasa and live with his guru for the rest of his life. With this idea, he made all arrangements to go to Calcutta towards the end of May. A few months' leave was also sanctioned by the government he worked for, and he intended to resign his job towards the end of the leave. He chose not to disclose his whole intention even to his wife, but said only that he desired to be with his guru for some time. With all her characteristic love and devotion to him, she readily agreed to what he so earnestly longed for. But the Guru Swami saw through all this plan and found the new move would thwart his own purpose. He had marked out his only Grihastha disciple for a great mission. Therefore, towards the end of May, a day before Shri Atmananda was to leave for Calcutta, the Guru Swami Yogananda appeared before him in a vision and told him that he should not start as he had planned. He was to continue as a householder for life, guarding the spiritual and phenomenal well-being of his own wife and children, and many others yet to come. Continuing, the Swami said, "If you start, you shall miss me. I shall have entered into Mahasamadhi on the 1st of June. The last part of the information upset Sri Atmananda completely. The slightest hint or suggestion from the Guru was a peremptory order for him. Immediately he cancelled his leave and waited, hoping against truth that the latter part of the revelation would not be correct. This was how Sri Atmananda was confirmed in his Grihastha ashrama. Exactly as he had been told, the great Swami Yogananda left his mortal coil and entered into Mahasamadhi precisely at 9 a.m. on the 1st of June. Services of his devoted wife. Srimati Parukuti Amma, the wife of Sri Menon, was extremely loving and devoted to him. She was the ideal of Indian womanhood in all respects. During the 4 long years of his spiritual sadhana, she devoted herself to her own rigorous sadhana, which was to serve her husband in every way and make it possible for him to devote all his time and energy for his spiritual pursuit. His sadhana was intense, one-pointed and continuous. Hers was also intense, but multifarious and disconnected. She had taken upon herself the responsibility of the entire household. They were blessed already with 3 children, the youngest one being only an infant. She looked after her husband's physical needs with clock-like regularity and devotion. That had the first priority over all her domestic duties. He had rarely to ask her for anything he needed. She successfully anticipated all his needs. Very often she had to bathe him and feed him with her own hands, as if he were a child, during those periods when he was in the transcendent plane and had very little body consciousness left. Even during the 4 short hours of rest that Shri Atmananda took in the middle of the night, she could not always sleep, because her domestic labors were not always finished before his retirement at night. She had to start again before he woke at 3 a.m. for the next day's sadhana. Her sleepless service and devotion to him for years remind us of the mythological service of Sri Lakshmana to Sri Rama for 14 years in the forest without sleep or rest. It also reminds us that the age-old ideal of Indian womanhood is not yet extinct. The marriage mantra of the Hindus enjoins, "Thou shalt not part even after death." This is no exaggeration, but the simple truth. It suggests that both the husband and wife stand as that principle which survives even death. It can never be the body, senses, or mind which we see disintegrating here in front of us. It can only be that permanent, self-luminous, non-dual principle in man, transcending body, senses, and mind. That is Atma, the ultimate truth or self, which knows no death. The married couple is asked to stand as that. What greater upadesha does one need? What greater initiation? The practical implementation of this noble ideal was worked out by the great women of ancient India, by their unrivaled observance of the ideal of Pativrata. Mythology abounds in instances of the most wonderful powers resulting from the sweet practice of this wonderful devotional yoga. The woman, through apparently ignorant, considers her husband as her God incarnate, and as such gives him all her love and devotion. Phenomenal love is only an expression of the knowledge of oneness, and the goal of love is that oneness itself. That oneness was gradually experienced by such women as a result of their simple but sincere tapas, or austerities. This experience bestowed on them the mysterious powers of Ishvara Bhava in varying degrees, even without their knowing or desiring them. The powers danced before them as their slaves. Even when the husbands had not reached any high spiritual level, their wives, by such sincere tapas, were able to acquire many such powers. But when a woman gets the rare privilege of doing such tapas towards the husband, who is well established in the ultimate truth, she is indeed enviable. That feeling of oneness or identification with the husband at all levels makes her a rightful partner in all his attainments. So it was with Sri Atmananda's devoted wife, Srimati Parakutta Amma. Swarupananda being her spiritual name. First disciples. Of the 5 disciples of Swami Yogananda, Sri Atmananda, the only householder disciple, was alone permitted to take the role of a guru, to accept disciples and guide them. Accordingly, he accepted his first few disciples during the period of 1923 and 24. He was a prosecuting inspector of police at Padmanabhapuram throughout the period of his spiritual sadhana and for some years later. Though he could not spare much time for his official preparations at home, his official work never suffered in any way on that account. Government proceedings gave him glowing tributes for his masterly prosecution of cases, even during the period of his sadhana. This has proved to the reasonable observer that legitimate phenomenal duties are never a hindrance to an earnest spiritual aspirant.